Okay. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the Southwest Regional BIM Hub session. If you're looking for a session on foreign policy, etc., I think that one is down the hall. So we're in the right place, first of all. BIM Hub. Okay, good stuff. Thank you very much for coming and battling the traffic. We're going to have a really good session today. I've been kindly joined by Keith Wildin of BAM and Simon Luff of FP Hurley, and they're each going to take 20 minutes or so to talk us through their experiences of BIM. And they're very welcoming of questions, so don't hesitate to chuck things in. We quite like it to be quite an interactive session. So Keith is working within BAM as the BIM coordinator there, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about, as we say, BIM for SMEs and for subcontractors. And hope you enjoy the session. Do ask any questions as you come through. And if you've got any ideas for further sessions that you'd like to hear about, other ideas that you have, do let me know at the end. Thank you very much. I'll pass you over to Keith.
Okay, good evening everybody. I think before I actually start to talk about what BIM perhaps means to you, or should mean to you guys, or could mean to you guys, either as SMEs, subcontractors, or maybe as even individuals. I think it's important to understand who it is that's actually asking you to do BIM and what the reasons are for that. So I'm also interested to understand who you think is asking you to do BIM at this moment in time. So just very quickly, by a show of hands, who believes it's the client that's asking you to do BIM? Okay. Main contractor? Okay. And then the government? Okay. Anybody for all three? Okay. Interesting. Okay. The reality of it is all three. But each of those people want you to do BIM for very different reasons. Firstly, if you take the client, the information or the output from BIM that they're after is very different to everybody else. They're looking for information which is going to help them actually operate their building. So they're looking for things like asset registers, maintenance schedules, surface areas for cleaning regimes, anything that would go into an O&M manual, and so on. There's a lot of information that the client is after. The main contractor, however, is after something quite different. Along with their design team, they're looking to obtain information which shows that the design is coordinated to a very high degree for a number of reasons. We don't want to have any issues on site to have to deal with. You guys as subcontractors and SMEs, you don't want to be held up on site. So we want to make sure that all the issues relating to design and buildability are rectified before we even get to site. That means you get to work more efficiently and you suffer no downtime. So that's one of the reasons the main contractor would want to do BIM. There are many other reasons, but that's just one of the key ones at this moment in time. The government, however, they want you to do BIM for something else. And we'll come to that in a moment. But I think it's important to understand that if a client or a main contractor has done BIM on a project and it's been done correctly, there's no way they would ever go back to working on a construction project in a traditional way. They will always want to do BIM. So I think you'll be seeing some cultural changes in our industry in the very near future, if you haven't done so already. Okay. The government, as we say, or the experts in the government, construction experts, are asking us to do BIM. But what they're actually asking us to do is modernise our industry. They feel that the construction industry is lagging behind other parts of the UK's industries. So they believe we need to modernise. One way they've been advised is that we should do BIM to modernise our industry. So they've set up a BIM Task Group to actually help us establish how we can do this. And part of the reason you're here today is because of the BIM Task Group. These are the leaders of putting on these sorts of events. The BIM Task Group say a few things, but one of the key things that you can find on their website is this hypothesis, which talks about significant improvements in cost, value and carbon performance. They also go on to say that they'll be helping the supply chain unlock more efficient and collaborative ways of working. So there's two things there. They're looking for improvements, but they're also saying that is what BIM can do for you as opposed to what you have to do for BIM. So they see as BIM a way of actually helping you guys. It's not just about what you have to do for BIM. Okay, unfortunately, there's 32% of contractors in the UK at this moment in time that say they won't consider even training any of their staff in BIM at this moment in time until the BIM practice standardise. Which I can understand that, and I can see exactly why people would say that and do that. But having said that, if you're not involved in BIM, how can you actually influence how it's going to progress and how it's actually going to be standardised in the future? If you leave it up to the key stakeholders, then all they're going to concentrate is on what's good for them. So we need guys like you to get involved and help us steer where BIM needs to go so that you get the benefits, not just the key stakeholders. And that's very important. Now I know what's probably going through your mind at this moment in time. You're probably thinking, that sounds like it's going to cost us a fortune in training and buying expensive software. That's not right. BIM is more about a process and how we actually get information to people. And that's what you guys need to get involved with. We need to know what information is valuable to you so that we can get that to you. And when you get the good information, then effectively on site, hopefully, you'll be doing a better job for us and for the client. So everybody will be getting a better service. So we want you to think about BIM in that respect. We don't want to force anyone to do BIM. We want you to see BIM for what it actually is. We want you to see the benefits for yourself and then do BIM for those reasons. We're not in the game of forcing anyone to do it at all. But what I will stress is that has to happen now, really. You mustn't let this process go too far down the line without actually having the involvement. Okay, so lots of people are asking you to do BIM, but what actually is BIM? Well, if you go onto the internet and look for the meaning of BIM, you find all these different diagrams surrounded with all sorts of text, and they're talking about trying to simplify the meaning of BIM for everybody to understand it. If you go on to Wikipedia, you get this description which talks about digital representations, proprietary formats, proprietary data, and of course it's all got to be networked. Well, when I read these sorts of things, I start to shut off, I must admit. I want things to be as simple as possible for everybody to understand. And BIM is simple. It doesn't need to be as complex as this. The actual outputs that we all get may be complex, but the actual process, which we all need to understand, that's the most important thing, is very simple. When I read those sorts of things, I think a bit like this guy. So, understanding that BIM means different things to different people will help you understand what BIM actually is. So, on this side, we've got the SME, subcontractors, or you guys, and you're after information which is going to help you build out on site. On the other hand, you've got a client which is after different information which is going to help them operate their building, which you've delivered. The process of getting those bits of information to those two people are exactly the same, the BIM process in the middle. But those two bits of information, sets of information, or data sets, they're very different. And that's where everyone, I believe, gets confused, because they're trying to understand this bit, these different bits of data. It's the process in the middle of how we get that data. That's the bit that we all need to understand. If we can understand that and work within that process, then everyone can benefit from it. And that's where we want the effort to be put at this moment in time. BIM is all about information and people, as we've just sort of described. But with BIM, we've actually got something that can help us get that information to the right people at the right time. And it should be quality information as well. So in the past, the culture around our industry has been, it's got better over years, but the recent years, but in the past it's sort of been every man for himself. So rather than it being that way, we'd like you to start thinking of BIM as being a bit more like Christmas, where you're expected to give, but you damn well expect to get something good in return. Okay? So what you get in return might just be much better quality information from your main contractor or your design team. But they need some advice or some help early days. And that's all that BIM is. It's just a process. All these things we've probably been doing for many years, but it's just doing it in a better way. Okay. This list here is some of the people which can either put information into BIM or take information away from BIM or out of the BIM. This is only a very small list, but it's probably some of the people you might have to deal with. So obviously you guys are there, clients, designers, main contractors, suppliers, building users, building control, health and safety. I mentioned suppliers because that's a real weak spot in BIM at this moment in time. We need information about all the elements going into a building. Nobody knows those elements better than the suppliers, the manufacturers. So we need those guys to come to the table as much as we need you guys. But very often, you are the people that have got the relationship with the suppliers. You guys are buying the materials rather than us in a lot of cases. So we need you to actually go to your suppliers and say, if you want me to put your element into this building, then we want you to provide us with some BIM information. The pressure needs to be put onto those guys a lot more than anybody else at this moment in time. There's a real shortfall in that level of information at this moment. Okay, the information that's there, listed there, again, is the sort of information that would be useful for you, hopefully, I think. Programs, material schedules, specifications, drawings, product data, goes back to the suppliers, visualizations, snaggings and permits. These are all things that you guys probably deal with on a day-to-day basis. But all this information could be provided from a BIM or could be benefited or improved through a BIM. Just take the first item, programs. Programs traditionally, a 2D Gantt chart, A3 sheet with loads of bars on it. That's how we're going to build, that's the sequence of the job. Imagine if you were given an animation of how the sequence of that building was actually going to go up. Alongside that program, the 2D and the 3D animation side of things, that would give you far more information than just the 2D. So I mentioned those two together, the 2D and the 3D, because it's not all about 3D information. BIM is just about information. It's not just it's just not 3D. It can be 2D and 3D, okay? Again, that's a really important thing for you guys to remember. So, we've said it's all about information and people. How do we get that information to the right people? Well, initially, each design consultant will produce a model, a design model. So each one of those models up on the screen, you could say is a silo BIM or an IBIM, an individual BIM. Lots of terms for this. It's a model. It's just a basic design model. As soon as there's information put into those models, that becomes potentially a BIM. It's got information in it and it's a model, so you've got a BIM. That's the vehicle for transferring the information, okay? Anything that is relevant to the project, the program we mentioned, we can link that into the model, which creates an animation. So we end up with a BIM or a 4D program. It's as simple as that. It's not that complex as to how this actually works. So these models can be as complex or as simple as is necessary depending on the project stage. So if you're at concept stage, the model's going to be very basic. There won't be a great deal of information in it. If you're at construction stage or as-built, there'll be a lot of information. But just because there's not a lot of information in it, but it's at concept stage, doesn't make it a bad BIM. It has to be relevant to the stages of the project that you're starting from. Okay, so we have these models. The BIM process, or the design process within BIM, is those models are shared amongst each design consultant. They're merged together to create one model, and that enables them to coordinate their designs together. So everybody's working in their little silos, brings the models together and coordinate that model. That model will directly, or the quality of that model directly relates to the standard of the information that goes in there, the quantity of that information, and the actual amount that goes in there. So little information or bad quality, you're going to get a bad BIM. If you get good quality, accurate models that carry a lot of data inside them, so a lot of your suppliers, your manufacturers' data, by placing in the elements, you get a good BIM. It's as simple and straightforward as that. Okay, does other people in the room, does anybody carry out design work at this moment? Okay, about half the room. If you guys keep your hands up a moment, does anybody provide information for O&M manuals? about 2/3 of the room, maybe, something like that. Okay. For those of you that haven't put your hands up, and if you're a subcontractor or an SME, that doesn't mean you're precluded from the BIM process. There's still a lot of good data that you can be given that might help your process. Just to give you an example, scaffolders. They're not really going to be using 3D software. They're not that sort of subcontractor. They're not really adding a great deal to the design side of things. But if we give them a 3D model that shows them where we want scaffolding, so we would model a representation of where we want this access equipment and schedule that in a 2D format and give them both those bits of information, they're much more aware of what we're actually asking them to do. I don't think it's any secret, main contractors struggle to price scaffolding all the time. It's a real problem for us. But with that sort of level of information, people can understand a lot more about what we're actually asking them to do. And that's a simple thing to do. And we're giving them that 3D model, but we can give them that as 2D drawings, but we can also give them free software so that they can view that representation of the scaffolding. So it's not just about design. BIM is a lot more than just design. And if you consider it as just design, then you're going to struggle to actually understand the whole process. Okay. BIM, as I say, is a lot more than design. So please remember that. But often designers themselves don't realize what information they're putting into a model. Very often we'll receive a model from a group of consultants, put that together, and when we start saying about producing bills of quants from it, they don't understand that we're actually going to use it for that purpose. So BIM can be used for producing a bill of quants. We can just extract those quantities straight out of the model. When designers are producing their model, they're not really considering at this moment in time that it's going to be used for that purpose. So the accuracy isn't quite right. It's not quite there for those sorts of purposes. So as well as consultant designers, but also subcontract designers, the accuracy has to be there. Material schedules, that's another thing. If all the materials are put in, then hopefully, or I should imagine some of you guys probably create materials lists. I think, is there somebody from Shires here doing IPS panels and that sort of thing? Materials lists probably would be pretty useful for you guys. Building control. They're starting to look at ways in which they can actually carry out assessments of building control to make sure the building's going to comply with building regs. Programs, we've talked about. O&M manuals. All this information can be put into a BIM and then extracted at the end of the day. There's far more information in a BIM than what people realise. But we need to get people like you guys to start looking at it and understanding that information's there, so that you put in what other people can benefit from, but also you get what you can benefit from. So we have all this great information in a BIM, and all these potential people that can use it. Ground workers, for instance, steel erectors, bricklayers, M&E consultants and contractors, lots of these people. But out of those there, ground workers, bricklayers, they're not really going to be looking to invest in any 3D software. But there's no reason why they can't benefit from this as well. As I say, talking about materials lists, that sort of thing, it can be really helpful. Bricklayers. So many times we have problems with difficult areas to understand how coursing should be. If they can actually see it in 3D, way before we actually start to build it, they can have an influence on how the foundations might help them build their tricky bit of brickwork. So there's lots of benefits. Steel erectors, many steel erectors now are working in 3D. M&E subcontractors, there's a few that are, but there should be a lot more. There's not enough that are doing it at the moment, and there's huge advantages for lots of these people to be using 3D. But please remember, it's not just 3D, it's 2D as well. Okay. I think it's important to say that 2D is still a contractual deliverable on all projects. So we're still going to be generating the same 2D information. But if you've got the 3D information as well, then it will help you understand that information a lot clearer. As I say, the 2D will always be there, but I think if you ignore the 3D side of things, you do so at your peril, really. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out and invest in 3D software, but keep your eye on it and see how the software progresses. There are lots of bits of free software out there for viewing models. And if you work on one of our BAM sites and you're a subcontractor that shows an interest in BIM or being able to view the models, we hold small workshops so that site guys can come and see how to use the model, and they can familiarise themselves with what they're actually trying to build way before any of the structure actually goes in. Also, if you're not that way inclined, just come and see the site guys. They'll give you a tour around the building, just so, again, you can familiarise yourself with how the building goes up, so you can understand what's being built, logistics, all those sorts of items. BIM, we believe, is starting to drive a bit of a cultural change in our industry. It will take time. Our industry always takes time to change, but we believe we're starting to see the beginnings of a cultural change. And if you take a traditional design process, it starts off pretty steady, ramps up towards the middle of the project, say, and then drops off towards the end. With BIM, that design profile is much different. What you will see is that peak comes much earlier in the process. So what that's telling us is the design should be a lot further advanced very early in the project. So you guys are always telling us you're never involved early enough. Well, in this case, with BIM, we should be able to get the design further advanced so we can give you the opportunity to comment on it way before you have done in the past. We're always having cladders come and say to us, the cold road isn't in the right places, it's not going to support our cladding. With BIM, we should be able to design that much earlier and maybe at tender stage say to them, here's the model, this is how the cold road is going to sit within the building. They can make a comment on it, they can feed back to us, they can change their tender to suit whether it's right or wrong. We can be much more confident that it's going to fit. So whereas in the past you guys have been saying you want to be involved earlier, I don't think there's going to be much reason why you can't be involved earlier. I think that change is coming. I don't think it's going to be very far away. If you do carry out design at this moment in time, well, how many people of the ones that said they do carry out design currently use 3D software? So a few of you do. Okay. So I assume that because you're here today, perhaps you've got the 3D software but maybe not been able to work in a BIM process. Would that be fair? Or is there other reasons? Not work with the right people, something like that, maybe? I don't know. Perhaps you have worked in BIM processes and just wanted to find out a bit more about it. Anyway, anybody that isn't using 3D tools at this moment in time, we would like you to consider using them. We're not saying go out tomorrow and buy 3D tools, but just consider them. If you're looking, or if you seriously think about going and buying some software, then get advice. Speak to your main contractor, speak to people that have experienced it already. Don't just go out there and plump for the same bit of software because everybody else is using it. We've got Taunton Fabs here now. I know they use a specialist bit of software which suits their architectural metalwork. They've bought something which we've not heard of anybody else using. But it does what they need to do as the primary purpose. That's the most important thing. It has to do what you guys need to do in the first instance. If there's a main contractor that's trying to push you down a particular route so that you use a particular type of software, they shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be doing that. They should be looking to work in an open BIM process so that we can all use the right bit of software for ourselves, but those bits of software do need to be able to talk with other bits of software, so they need to be compatible with other bits of software. If you are serious about buying these bits of software, then check that it will work with an IFC file. IFC files are kind of like your 3D equivalent of a PDF. It will provide all the information that you need, but it's not something that can be manipulated. So if you hand it over to somebody, they're not really going to be able to change it. There are ways of changing the information and things, but the core file is not going to be changeable. IFC files are recognised worldwide as well, so nobody really should be having any other problems working with this file. And that's the file type that at the moment the government, or the BIM Task Group, is suggesting we all put all our efforts into. It's not perfect, and you might have some issues with certain types of software, but the idea is that if you are using 3D software, check that it produces an IFC file, and if you are using it on a live project, then test it. Test it as early as you possibly can. That's the best course of action you can take at this moment in time. But look out for the IFC file. That's the one that you want to be looking out for. Okay, we've all been squeezed over recent years, and we all need to sort of become more efficient to drive our profit margins. Everything's got more expensive, and prices for ourselves have gone down over recent times. So think of BIM as perhaps an opportunity. BIM is maybe a way of making yourselves more efficient. Have a look at it and see if you can make your own processes more efficient through using BIM. BIM could be the differentiator between you actually getting a job or not. If BIM perhaps doesn't do what you need it to do, but you're working with a main contractor that is using BIM, then go and speak to them. Try and make it work for you as well. But it could be the differentiator between you being selected or not. There are many legal aspects around BIM, or being touted around BIM. But to be honest with you, I think if you take these aspects apart and look at what they're actually asking you to do, then I don't think you're really being asked to do anything different or anything new. You're not being asked to do more than what you've ever done in the past. It's just asking you to do things a little bit differently. BIM's not really been around long enough to deal with lots of legal issues, to be honest with you, and that's probably part of the reason why lots of the documentation is written in the way that it is. But it's quite simplistic in terms of legal documentation. The UK has some of the best BIM documents in the world, to the extent that it's being copied in other places in the world. So have a look at them and see if you can actually start to use them and become aware of what's being required of you. Lots of the documentation is not necessarily, as I say, legal speak. It's more about getting the deliverables from the right people. The other thing that the BIM documents are trying to improve was standards. At this moment in time, there's a huge difference in the qualities of BIMs that are being received. So a lot of the documentation is trying to get everybody in the same playing field so that the standards are exactly the same, and that will help us all improve the BIM process. If you haven't received any documents already from any of your contracts, you may well do in the near future, but some that you might receive are the employer's information requirements, which just sets out exactly what it says. It looks to set out what the client is going to require for the project in the respect of BIM. You might see an execution plan, or an implementation plan rather. You may even get asked to fill in a supply chain BIM assessment, which is just talking about what your current training levels are, what software you do or don't use, what level of BIM experience you've got. What I would urge anyone to do is answer that honestly. We've had issues in the past where people have been, shall we say, liberal with the truth on that, or their capabilities, and it's caused us a great deal of problems. If you're honest and you come to us and say, we need a bit of help, we'll give you that help. We want it to work for us. We want it to work for you. If it's not going to work for you, it's not going to work for us. So it's in our own interest to help the likes of you guys. So please be honest if you do receive one of them. I think that's probably going to put everybody in a good stead for a project going forward. All these documents will feed into a BIM execution plan, and that will set the standards and the protocols for how a project's going to go forward. Just to close then, I think what we're asking you to do is embrace the BIM process. We understand that there's probably fears in the cost of software. You don't have to go out and buy that software at this moment in time for a lot of you. Have a look at it though. Please don't stop investigating it if you do carry out design. But get advice, talk to people. But it's well worth going through the short-term pain now so that you're going to get the long-term benefits from BIM. And that's me done. Okay, so just to, yeah.
Be interested to know, you haven't made any mention of the deadline for public sector contracts having to be compliant with BIM. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the deadline is being watered down gradually. If you look at it, what it is today, and I think it talks about centrally procured public sector projects, which is a bit different to what it was a couple of years ago. But regardless of what the deadline is, we've seen enough of the benefits to persuade us that we just want BIM today. We don't want to wait for that period of time. We also have an FM arm to our business, and the benefits that they get from these projects is huge. So we've got an added interest in making it work. But clients are starting to realise, outside of the government, clients are starting to realise the benefits of BIM, and more clients are requesting it or demanding it on their projects. I mean, you've only got to look at projects or clients like Gatwick Airport, which have been doing BIM for over 10 years, I believe. If it wasn't working for them, they'd have stopped a long time ago. So there are real benefits, and the more we all investigate it, the more we do it, then it's only going to get better. But I think the industry as a whole is going to struggle to reach that deadline. We think we're probably further along the road than a lot, but we do have concerns about achieving everything within level 2 BIM. It's a big task. It's a big task. A lot of resources need to be thrown at it.
And just moving on from that, obviously as part of that level 2 BIM implementation, you need to do soft landings if you're doing. Are you doing any of that kind of work?
Yep. Yeah. Again, to make the soft landing side of things work, then really you need to be doing the full aspects of level 2 BIM. And if we're going to be asked to monitor the operation of a building for 2 or 3 years after we hand it over, then we need all the data that we can possibly get. So again, it's really important for us to get that. And I think it'll be exactly the same as clients see the things like the soft landings schemes coming in and see the advantages to them, they're going to demand it more and more. So the contractors that are out there ignoring it, I think, you know, there's a big sort of sledgehammer coming their way.
Hi, I work in health and safety. In health and safety, large contractors have imposed on their supply chain their management systems for responding to health and safety, which is fine if you're a small supplier who only works for one large contractor, which is a dangerous situation to be in anyway. And it's caused a lot of confusion in the supply chain and the SME sector because they're being told you must do this or you must do that by their different clients with a small c. How is BIM not going to suffer the same fate? How are the large contractors dealing with not becoming the large bullies around the process that needs to be adopted?
Yeah, I think there's the IFC file is one thing that can help that situation, but if you take it even broader to the subcontractors and SMEs that aren't carrying out design, there's still O&M information that's going to be required from them. So an example of what you're saying is lots of contractors potentially could say, no, you all have to give us model information which contains your O&M information. We don't believe that's the correct approach because it's just never going to happen that everybody's going to be working in 3D. And we're looking that it should be very simple sort of spreadsheet type information where we're looking for specific information which isn't generic. So if we're talking about O&M information in the past where people have given an A4 sheet and then brochures with 6 or 7 different products in, what we're asking for people to do is fill in a standard A4 sheet and extract that data from the brochures and put it into a single sheet. So we're not asking anybody to do anything which is complex or beyond their means. The health and safety side of it, yeah, I know what you mean. There's so much sort of paperwork it's in a different form, but it's duplicated across however many tens, 50s of main contractors. I don't see that with BIM we have to do that. Everybody should really be working towards the same standards. So whereas at the moment BIM is new and everybody's perhaps got a wide base of doing things in a different way, hopefully as time goes forward that'll taper down and we'll get to the one right way of doing it, and everybody will follow that right way. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way of doing things, and our approach is that we've got to make it open to everyone. We can't just do this with sort of a closed door policy, just saying the ones with the 3D capabilities can do this. We can't do that. That's just going to be a complete disaster. We're going to isolate. If we do that, we'll end up isolating small pockets of subcontractors that can do this, and obviously prices are going to go out the window and all that sort of thing. So we have to make sure that it's open to everybody. We can't have that situation where it's just a closed door.
We've just had a barn conversion done, and there's a set of stairs that starts straight and then curves round and opens up. And the guys who actually led on the design of that are the guys who've got the skill and the vision who are actually working with the wood.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got creativity in the whole of their being, and that they can make it work.
Yes.
But if you ask them to do BIM, that maybe their boss could engage with IT and this, that, and the other. I'm just concerned we're going to lose a lot of creative energy, some of the things above average, some of the best that we could be.
Yeah, I mean we can't have that sort of situation, and that example that you've used, we would expect take it to a bigger project that we're more used to working on. Obviously there would be a lead designer that would be working with the craftsman type person that you're talking about, and we would expect that craftsperson to input into the design process. Whether you call it a BIM process or whether you just say it's a collaborative process, it's what we've always should be doing. So we should be talking to these guys, getting our lead designer to, if necessary, put that design into a BIM model and then coordinate it. But sometimes there's going to be things like that we can't necessarily embrace into the 3D world as well. So it might be that we just generate a space that will take that staircase, and we get over it that way, and then it's done in a traditional format. That way we're getting the best subcontractor or the best craftsman to do the work, but we're still actually doing a level of coordination that needs to be done to get that staircase in.
I am a huge BIM fan, so don't take the negatives.
Quick question. It's almost like a two-part question. Are you finding that the people who are working for you are having to change their skills and training needs almost to implement BIM? And what do you think that means for me being a lecturer here at the university?
There is a change in skills when you start going to the design stage of it and the 3D side of it. There is definitely a change in skills. The bigger thing is a change in a mindset, and whereas in the past maybe you would teach a structural engineer to be a structural engineer and he's working in an isolated pocket, similarly with other consultants, now those guys need to be taught how to work alongside all the other consultants and take their advice, feed into their design, so that we're getting further down the road much earlier in the whole process. And that's exactly the same for the subcontractors. We need these guys to be much more involved in that process. So students going out into the world and working for lead designers, they have to be prepared to speak to at these guys in the room today and getting their experience. So it's not necessarily just about being able to use the software, it's about actually being able to deal with people and how they extract that information from those people and then put it into their information and use that information correctly.
You talked about the design process and decision making coming further forward in the project sort of life. How have you found that with your clients in terms of decision making and getting answers out of people early enough to be able to fix those designs down?
Indifferent. Some clients, we try to do BIM for a coordination point of view on most of our projects, whether the client wants BIM or not. Sometimes the consultants are interested in BIM, other times they're not. But very often when we start showing the client where there's perhaps certain issues within their building or trying to do sort of room sign-off procedures, that sort of thing, and we actually say, well, here's your 2D, but also here's a 3D model that you can look at just to help you interpret that. It's sort of like, whoa, get rid of that 2D stuff, let's have more of the model. And they're engaged and they want to make decisions based on that 3D model. Whereas in the past, you might put somebody down in front of a 2D drawing and 5 minutes later they're saying, oh, I've just got to go and do this, and you don't see them for half hour and you don't get the decisions that you need. So yeah, clients are much more engaged in a 3D model than ever they will be on the 2D side of things. So we do get decisions made much earlier in the process. But there still are some clients out there which are still quite old school, or maybe just doing one-off projects, and it's difficult to get them up to speed with what you need to do, because there's also that danger that you sit down in a room with a few people and you say, we want to sign off all these rooms today, and they get all excited about being able to see their building for the first time, and I say, well, let's just have a look at that room and let's talk about the colour of the chairs in there. And we're saying, hang on a minute, we're trying to set out the sockets and radiators today, and that's what you need to concentrate on. So there's also a change in the clients that we have to sort of manage as well. So you have to prepare a client to do this as well as all the rest of the project team.
How's it affected your procurement strategy in terms of the upfront benefit?
It's quite a funny one actually, because now we know that we can get better information from BIM, we're almost delaying that procurement in some cases. So if we think that we're going to hold off for a couple of weeks and then get better information, get it out to the subcontractors, they can provide a much more robust price to us. There's more surety for them in what they're quoting for us as well, so there's no contingencies or less contingency added to it. So it's affecting it in quite a big way, but we think that we can improve that a lot. I mean, structural steel guys, whereas in the past we would be sending out 2D information and bills of quants, that sort of thing, then now we're just sending out the model. So as soon as we receive the information, it's just the model goes out and they bring it into their own software and they're literally tracing over the top of it or adapting that information, and it's speeded up that process very much. It's a lot quicker.
So when you say you're sending out the model, are you sending the whole thing or just the steel?
Just the steel in those situations. Yeah.
I come this on the recording to BIM and just find that about it. But you said just now that BIM was great documentation and that can be a great benefit. Can you give an example of that and say why that isn't just a layer of bureaucracy that we didn't need to do away with it?
Well, the documentation, you're talking about from a construction point of view? So valuable to... Okay. Well, talking about bills of quants then, for instance, for steelwork, for instance, when you receive a model, or when we receive a model, rather than sending that information out to be taken off, we can, within 5 minutes, create a bill of quants. And that information is exactly what is in the model. So there's a 3D representation of every beam, every length, and it's weighted up. All the information about the weight of the type of the beam and all that is all in there. So within, as I say, 5 minutes, we can produce a bill of quants for that sort of thing and send it out. The other documentation going on a stage further, if you were applying, say, Itchemison paint to that to those columns or beams, and you were, say, a 3D working in 3D packages, we would want you to apply some data attached to that model or attached to those beams to say there's intermittent paint. It needs to be checked every 5 years or whatever to make sure it's still intact. That information then can go through into the BIM. You don't have to worry about it, but when we extract O&M manuals from that, that information is there. So that improves that documentation. So rather than you giving us a intermittent paint brochure, we've got the actual pertinent information to that thing. The documentation is vast. There's huge amounts of potential documentation that can be produced, and lots of people are working on lots of different documents at this moment in time, trying to make them work for them. The scaffold schedule one is another document which we find should be very beneficial to us. But what's important to you document-wise, as I say, it's very different to the client, and there's just a huge number of documents that can be produced, but it's getting those produced is the difficult bit, how we extract that from a 3D world.
Is it enough, is there possible to put enough information on a particular product then to do away with O&Ms?
The theory behind it is yes. At the moment, there are quite a few companies out there that are trying to sell dedicated bits of software for extracting this information and providing it to the client. We don't believe that that's necessary. By using databases, which is not a normal bit of software necessarily, but is available to everybody and isn't a huge cost, we believe that we can produce the right information for O&M manuals. We haven't necessarily achieved it on a project yet, but we've proved the concept and we know that that works.
Because most of our stuff is quite repetitious, so if the same information we put within, for example, a duct set, we put the same information as a record for maintenance and cleaning of that particular product, that could be duplicated every time we do.
Yeah. So
that part of the product.
Yeah. So you guys, IPS panels for toilets and bathrooms, these guys install, and if you were putting in the same manufacturer's equipment all the time, what we would like you guys to do is go to that manufacturer and say, we want all your data as BIM families, so that when you're creating your models and your designs, or maybe they will do that for you, but all that information you just talked about is attached within the model, and it's just put in with the design. It comes to us. Nobody has to go and seek that information and sort it all out. But as I say, the clever bit is extracting it out and getting it to the right people.
Getting that supplier to buy into it, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
That's the big
There are schemes trying to do that with national BIM object libraries and that kind of stuff, and trying to do that kind of information. But like I say, it's the manufacturers need to develop them, and the smart ones are thinking, well, if I develop them, somebody's going to use them, which means I'm going to use my product.
Yeah. Okay.